Hey Sketchy friends, today I want to look at sketching birds in ink and watercolor. I'm going to do this from photo reference so I can show you some different styles of sketching birds with ink, watercolor and a touch of watercolor pencil. However, do stick around until the end of the video to see my attempts at sketching birds from real life at my local bird sanctuary. Okay, so in this sketchbook I have some examples of some birds that I sketched from photos. I wanted to do them from life, but particularly on this day when we were at Birds of Eden, which is the world's largest free flight aviary, by the way, it was absolutely tipping down with rain. So I had to do my sketching from photos, but it was still fun to try and draw them from photos because, you know, I'm just not used to sketching birds at all. And I was pretty happy with how they came out, to be honest with you. By the way, if you want a full tour of this sketchbook from my road trip around South Africa, you can check that out in this video. And I also have an ebook with all of the sketches, which is available to purchase. So if you want a copy of my sketches along with some amusing little anecdotes, then do check it out. I'll put the link in the description below. Okay, so let's have a go at some bird sketching. If you want to use my reference photos that I took whilst I was at Birds of Eden, some of which I am using in this video, then do go check out my blog post on this very same subject matter, which is over on urbansketchingworld.com. And again, the link is in the description below. This is demo number 1. I just want to show you that I'm not really using watercolor paper for this. It's just a heavyweight cartridge paper, 200 GSM, and I was pretty impressed with how it handles watercolor. This smooth paper is great for small sketches and demos like this, as I don't feel too precious about the sketch pad, and it just helps me loosen up a bit. So in this demo, I am sketching a duck of some description. I think it's called a shoveler. Don't quote me on that, I'm not an expert on birds, but I did really enjoy visiting Birds of Eden though, it was really interesting. I'm going to use my normal sketching process, which is to sketch a rough outline in pencil, and then go in with some more details in ink, erase some of the most obvious pencil marks, and then paint with watercolor. So I mainly draw architecture, so drawing animals is definitely not within my comfort zone, but I try to apply the things I do when I draw buildings or scenes to animals as well. I'm not looking to do a realistic sketch, but an illustration that captures the character of the bird, such as the way they're standing or looking or whatever, as well as being recognizable that it's that specific bird. I tried to look at the overall shape of the bird, but then try and break down those shapes within the bird and how they relate to each other in order to get reasonable proportions. So look for those landmarks, certain areas of colours, where a wing intersects with another section, where the leg starts in relation to the shape that it's touching. And if you try to think in terms of these shapes and how they interact, it will really help you to simplify the drawing process. So I'm just using my water brush to add some watercolor paint to the duck. I felt like there needed to be a ground as well, so I painted in these loose paving slabs with my flat brush, but then I felt they were a bit too loose, so I put in some loose lines with a grey watercolor pencil just to add a tad of definition. This is all personal taste and a matter of experimentation. Sometimes you do something you don't like and you think, damn, I ruined it, but that's okay. You remember that for next time and try something different instead. So I decided to write down my process in the corner of the sketch just to keep a note about what I did. I think this is actually a great way to learn, to also remember what you did, and again to just make that sketchbook page feel less precious, less finished art, more practice and experimentation logbook. In this sketch, I want to focus on some perspective and composition issues. So there are 3 ducks at various distances to the eye, one close, one in the middle, and one further away. It's fun to exaggerate the perspective of this. By the way, something like this would be considered to be like 0-point perspective or non-linear perspective, and that's because there are no parallel lines in the scene. Well, there are in the photo, there's the slabs on the ground, but they don't really help us with the perspective of the ducks. If you would like a very brief basic rundown of perspective, make sure you check out this video where I also mentioned some techniques of how to show non-linear perspective in your sketching. It's all very quick and straightforward, I promise. So my strategy in this sketch was to utilize a few techniques to show that one duck was closer to me, one was in the middle, and one was further away. And so I drew the duck in the foreground, i.e. the one closest to me, larger and towards the bottom of the page. The middle duck is a tiny bit higher up on the page, and the background duck is much further up on the page compared with the duck that's closest to me. So the lower an object is on the page versus the higher something is on the page is a way that you can show perspective. Also, size matters. The closer the duck, the larger. The further the duck is away, the smaller it'll be, even though all three ducks are more or less the same size in real life. And you can also see this effect in the photo reference as well. So thirdly, the closest duck will have more details and a stronger colour, and the duck further away from me will have less details and slightly more subdued colours. Remember, I am exaggerating the perspective, so this may not be completely true to the photo or real life of the ducks, but it's a way to kind of exaggerate it to show it in your sketch. And in this way we end up with a fun little vignette of the three ducks, and the viewer gets the sense that the ducks are different distances away. In regards to the sketching process in this one, I tried this one in a slightly different way. So I sketched in pencil, then I added some watercolor on top of the pencil, and then I just added some little details on top, in ink on top, more on the closest duck, so more details on the duck that's closer to me, and hardly any details on the duck that's furthest away from me. Okay, so on to Demo 3. I decided to switch sketchbook for Demo 3 as I wanted to try a different style. I knew I wanted to use heavier sort of wet colours, so I reached for my 100% cotton Etcher sketchbook, and this is the hot press version. I decided I wanted to try and paint the bird directly in watercolour. So I started off with a bit of water, but I realised I couldn't see what I was painting at all. So I added the very tiniest little tint of pink that was just in my mixing area so I could see what shapes I was making. And I knew the bird was going to be a stronger pinky red sort of colour anyway, so it wasn't a problem to not use clear water. I then dabbed in some red and sort of let it do its thing. This is kind of in the vein of Andrew Geeson. He is a loose watercolour artist and he has his own YouTube channel here, so go check him out. I love the way he paints loose wet flowers. It's really beautiful. And I tried this method out in my recent video about different styles of painting the same thing, which was a crane flower. So you can check that video out if you want to as well. So yeah, I dabbed in some red and then some Payne's grey for the blacker parts of the bird. And then I used some random concoction of quinadricone rose, Naples yellow, and even a touch of Schmincke Tundra rose, I think it was. And that's one of the super granulating colours that Schmincke have. Because, I looked at the photo and the bird's actually quite a dirty pink, purpley colour in areas. Dirty or muddy colours can get a bad rap, but when you're looking at real life, a lot of it is dirty and muddy. I feel that statement may take a philosophical turn for the worse, so I'm going to veer away from that, but you know what I mean. So there's something to be said for a messy mixing area. You can pick up all kinds of weird and wonderful mixes of colours, and that's kind of why I don't clean my palette. It's not because I'm lazy in the slightest. So let that initial wet layer dry, and then after that I decided to apply some details with a sharp Inktense pencil, and I used indigo, not black, as I think it complements the colours of the bird a bit better. It's not quite so harsh as the black. I then decided to go in with another layer of watercolour to brighten up the red, and part of me wishes I hadn't. When my husband Duncan saw the footage, he preferred the bird when it was just at that first wet stage, and you can see that really nice granulation, and I think it could have been better too. So I know I can be a bit heavy-handed when it comes to adding more colour and more contrast. I just want everything to be big and bold, But actually these beautiful subtle mixtures and granulations are where a lot of the magic of watercolor lies. So do try this out for yourself and see how you go. Maybe let those watercolors sing a bit and don't be as heavy-handed as me. Okay, final demo, guys. I hope this video has been interesting and informative to watch, and I hope you've picked up a few ideas or thoughts along the way. Remember, if you want to use my reference photos to try any of these sketches out, just head over to my blog. Link is in the description. And if you want weekly demos from me centered around a theme each month, do head over to Patreon. There's a lot to dig through there, and I can guarantee if you work through the content that it will definitely enhance your sketching, but mainly just give you a huge dose of inspiration. We tend to focus on lots of different styles, and hopefully this will open you up to exploring and investigating a lot of different processes in your sketchbook. Okay, so I've changed sketchbook again. I have so many on the go, it's actually ridiculous. I need to actually finish some of them. I need to give them all equal attention, and this is where my issues lie. So I guess I'm just not a one sketchbook woman. I keep thinking I should do some videos on sketchbooks and which ones I like or which ones I don't like, etc. So if you'd like to see that, let me know in the comments below. So this is the toned Hahnemühle watercolor sketchbook. It's the A5 landscape version, and I really love this sketchbook. I really enjoy sketching wide vistas across the 2 pages. And I recently did that while sketching at the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Centre last week. And obviously that's, it's a very somber and moving experience to visit, but it was also really great to get the opportunity to sketch the outside of the building with some of the other members of Urban Sketches Johannesburg. So yeah, I've got a little vlog about that also over on Patreon. So I started by drawing the basic shapes of this bird in brown watercolor pencil. Then I moved on to the watercolor paint. The bird's got quite a lot of white in it, so I thought I'd experiment with the white I have in my Etcher watercolor set on top of the toned paper. It's actually something I weirdly haven't tried much of. So yeah, I painted on the white on the head of the bird, and it became a bit of a muddy mess on the head. So I abandoned ship and moved to a different area of the sketch, thinking I'll come back and I'll try and rescue that part later on. So then I painted the belly, which is probably not the correct term, by the way. Bird belly? Belly? I don't know. Do birds have bellies? Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so I painted the belly and the tail white, and then I decided to paint the chest and the body with Payne's grey, but leaving negative spaces for where the white spot should go. I thought this might be a bit more of a successful strategy than trying to paint white on top of the grey, and I think I was probably correct with that. Perhaps if I used full-on gouache it might be okay, but I realised in this context it wouldn't. And notice I'm making very rough negative shapes. None of those splotches are perfectly round, so if you do have a go at this one, make sure your shapes are rough and organic, and this will really help. So I paint in the white splotches and it's not showing up great, but it's okay. I then darkened some of the areas of the Payne's grey to sort of help with some contrast. I also get out my black Inktense pencil. It's nice and sharp, and I add in some details and some texture, and it also helps to darken some of the areas. I then thought I'd try a white watercolor pencil to see if that might help increase the whiteness of some of the areas. And then right at the end of this sketch, I thought I'd just try a white paint marker on top of some of those areas, just to really try and make it more dramatic. I'm actually really happy with how this one came out. When I did genuinely think it might be a disaster when I was applying that first bit of white watercolor on the head. I think the only thing to my eye that's really dodgy is that right foot. So the side of my brain that thinks it can draw things without actually looking barged the other side of my brain completely out of the way, the side of my brain that deals with observation. And it just drew a bird foot in a completely symbolic way that actually looks nothing like the photo reference. So by the time any of us realised, I had a total mess on my hands. Figuratively speaking, of course, no bird mess was actually used in the making of this video. Anyway, this concludes this video of 4 birds in different styles. I hope you enjoyed it, and here is the bonus footage of me sketching at the local bird sanctuary. I was actually pretty happy with some of these little sketches, and it was a really fun experience. I really want to go and do it again very soon because the day was cut short yet again by rain. Not too heavy, but it was splotching all over the place, and some of my ink lines were running, and there was just nowhere undercover to sketch, so it just sort of started to become a mess. So we just kind of had to call it a day. But yeah, I was really happy with what I did do, so I'll just leave you with a little montage of that at the end here. And if you do want more from me, don't forget to check out my one of my 2 ebooks, or both of my ebooks, also my course Sketchy Adventures, which is now open all the time if you'd like to join. And also don't forget to check out Patreon, where we do the weekly demos around a theme of the month. The link is in the description below, and I will see you in the next video.